Exactly 2 years ago, the Italian cabinet met to discuss a dramatic public policy decision: the possible quarantining of 10 northern municipalities. Well, the 10 towns turned into the quarantining of half the country, and that idea spread faster than the COVID. But don't worry, just 2 weeks to flatten the curve. 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into 2 years to flatten everything but the virus, and then vaccine passports if you want to keep your job in the NHS or at a New York hospital, or get a cup of coffee in France, or buy food to keep yourself alive in Germany, or not get fined and jailed in Austria. But don't worry, it's just a couple of jabs. Well, okay, 3. Well, okay, once every 5 months, according to America's Centers of Disease Control. Well, let's make that every 3 months, according to President Macron. Oh, and in Britain, we're going to stick it in your kids, even though there is no medical justification for doing so. Oh, and it's such a public health emergency, we're going to treat it like MI6 Black Ops and withhold all the info. From the Evening Times in Glasgow, quote, "Public Health Scotland will stop publishing data on COVID deaths and hospitalisations by vaccination status over concerns it is misrepresented by anti-vax campaigners." The public health watchdog announced the change in policy in its most recent COVID statistical report, saying the frequency and content of the data would be reviewed. Instead, officials will focus on publishing more robust and complex vaccine effectiveness data. Public Health Scotland officials said significant concerns about the data being misused deliberately by anti-vaccination campaigners is behind the move. So the report published on Wednesday will be the last weekly publication to include the data on infection rates among the vaccinated and unvaccinated. By COVID data being misrepresented, they mean noticing that, say, in the 4 weeks ending February the 4th, 478 Scots died of the COVID, of whom 417, let me see, that's over 87%, were vaccinated. So over 80% of Scottish deaths in the last 4 weeks have been among the vaccinated. Yeah, I see how releasing those numbers could easily be, quote, misrepresented. Best that the government keeps the numbers to itself. And in case you were feeling not entirely 100% on board with all of this and were minded to protest, the New Zealand military are being readied to clear protesters outside Parliament House in Wellington. The non-stop 24/7 Barry Manilow soundtrack that Jacinda Ardern was pumping out to drive the protesters nuts didn't do the trick. It turns out there's a big correlation between anti-vaxxers and Barry Manilow fans. Who knew? So Jacinda is going old school and sicking the troops on them. But even if you don't want to protest yourself, but just want to, say, send $50 to some Canadian trucker who wants to keep his job, Justin Trudeau, the world's first totalitarian mammy singer, will freeze your bank account. Here's Canada's laughably misnamed Minister of Justice.
You've just compared people who may have donated to this to the same people who are funding maybe a terrorist. I just want to be clear here, sir. This is really important. A lot of folks say, look, I just don't like your vaccine mandates and I donated to this. Now it's illegal. Should I be worried that the bank can freeze my account? What's your answer to that?
Well, I think if you are a member of a pro-Trump movement who's donating hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars to this kind of thing, then you ought to be worried.
So if you're favourably disposed toward the 45th President of the United States, the Canadian Minister of Justice wants to seize your current account. Oh, and if the totalitarian mammy singer catches you on the streets of his capital, he'll confiscate your kids and dogs. The free world seems to have travelled a long way from those first 10 municipal quarantines in northern Italy. What's really going on?